What's up, guys? Coach Frost here. Today, I got to sit down with Dr. Billy Gill, the human chat GPT. We talked brain health, specifically after trauma. We talked the cure to cancer, and even a few party tricks like how to make your pee turn blue. Hope you guys enjoy it. Have fun. Dr. Billy Gill, bit of an underachiever. Quick bio on you for the folks that don't know you. So, Harvard degree in biomedical engineering. That sounds a wee bit difficult. Med school in Alabama, residency at UT Health McGovern Medical School here in Houston, and then you studied under the famous trauma surgeon, Dr. Red Duke.
Absolutely.
Who I want to hear more about him, and he also performed the wedding ceremony for you and your wife.
Married us in our backyard along with his dog.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it was actually really cool because we had a swimming pool in our backyard.
Okay.
And Red comes, the guy was larger than life, right?
Yeah.
But in person, he was every bit as genuine as you would expect him to be, long-term Texan. And he came, brought his dog with him. And while he's doing the ceremony, dearly beloved, he's reading out of his really old book, his dog goes off and starts swimming in the swimming pool. And so right about the time we're holding hands and exchanging vows, his dog comes up in between us and shakes himself off. And so we have this wonderful photo of myself, my wife, Michelle, Red Duke, and then Jake, and this giant shower of water from the dog showering everybody. So anyway, that's my Red Duke gave us both a marriage and a bath at the same time.
And he was like the pioneer, one of the pioneers in trauma surgery, ER, life flight. I mean, the whole thing, right?
Yeah. So a very well-respected trauma surgeon. Life flight was really his big thing.
Yeah.
There were two programs that started up right about the same time. I think one up in maybe Pittsburgh started just a little bit before the one in Houston, but this is now the flagship a life flight medical evacuation program in the country.
The Houston one.
Yeah, the Houston Life Flight Memorial Hermann. They run 3 different bases. They don't. So most life flight programs are based at the hospital where they land.
Okay.
Houston is so big, and the program is so big that there are external bases where the helicopters stay in order to shorten the flight time, out to wherever the.
So if they get a call in Katy, there's something out that way and that sort of thing.
Correct, north, south, and west.
Nice.
I think it's now 8 or 9 helicopters.
Wow.
And they're just about to start expanding it again. So
I did the helicopter tour at the Med Center at Herman, and I invited some buddies, and they rolled out the red carpet for us. So we went up there. And I was thinking like, oh, this is going to be cool. We're going to check. And it was. But while we're up there, I mean, they were bringing people down. And it went from being like this fun thing to, oh, my gosh, there's a real live person with real live problems coming off this helicopter. And, I mean, it was intense.
It's fun to visit, but, you don't want to be on that helicopter as a patient. But if you have to be, I think you're really, really happy that we have this super highly functioning program with, almost all the pilots are ex-military.
Yeah.
They have an enormous level of experience in the flight medical groups. They see a lot of difficult stuff, and they do a fantastic job. One of the other interesting things about life flight, we push our research that we do at the medical school on traumatic injury resuscitation. We push that all out to the helicopters, and they start that treatment in flight. So things that have come up like using different blood products for resuscitation, they have all those things on the helicopter. They do ultrasound for diagnosis. These are things in most places don't happen until you're in the emergency room, in the trauma bay, where you have physicians running it. We have that stuff being done on the helicopters by the flight medics.
And minutes really count in those type of scenarios, right?
We say every second counts, right? I mean, it used to be the golden hour. They said that's kind of a military term from back in Vietnam, where they found that people who got evacuated and treated within that first hour did better because they bled less,
Yeah.
they had less shock, they had less organ dysfunction because of the lack of blood flow that occurs when you're bleeding.
Yeah.
We have knocked that way, way down in Houston.
Cool.
Houston EMS, the flight crew, and even the police forces have made it a big priority to clear the scene tactically and get medical personnel so they can get someone who's been shot or in a car accident. They can get them to treatment as quickly as possible.
Wow. So I want to I know because from a previous conversation we've had, getting through your bio here, I mean, general surgeon, trauma surgeon, critical care, and you're also an entrepreneur who's invented, products and I guess equipment would be the best way to say it. One of which is on the helicopter to help warm up blood. Is that right?
Yeah, that one's not on the Herman helicopter, but it's on some other helicopters here in Texas. We, so it was interesting. I was a resident when 9/11 happened.
Okay.
And one of my mentors, a guy named Charles Cox, was in the Army Reserve when that happened and got deployed to Afghanistan in the very first wave of people to get sent over there into the early 2002.
So was he at UT here in Houston?
He still is. He's a pediatric surgeon.
Oh,
here.
but he was in the reserves while here and then got sent.
Correct. He got the call
Wow.
and said, "You're gonna be, you
buddy."
better pack up because you're gonna be on a plane to Bagram here pretty soon."
Wow.
And he came back and said, "You would not believe what we do to warm up IV fluids there. Sometimes we throw them in a microwave if we have one.
Oh,
We have this battery powered. It uses like a motorcycle battery thing. It's huge. We use it once, we throw it away. There's got to be a better way to do this,
Yeah.
right? And you have to warm up the things that you give people when they're bleeding because if you get cold, your blood stops clotting.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really incredibly important that you don't induce hypothermia in somebody who's bleeding because you will eventually get into a cycle of bleeding that you can't get out of. And so he comes back and says, there's got to be a better way to do this. I'm a recent biomedical engineer, undergraduate training, and finishing up my residency in surgery. And I start thinking, well, what's got a lot of energy in it? And we came down to hydrocarbons, butane, propane. That's what's used when people want to cook their food or boil their water on a mountain, right? You can buy that at REI.
Mm-hmm.
What we did is we figured out how to take that and make it computer controlled, very precise, runs on a catalytic system so that you get this nice little cherry red glow. You don't have an open flame.
Wow.
And microprocessor controlled that keeps it right at 37 degrees C, 98.6 Fahrenheit. And so that project started in 2003. First led to an FDA approved product in 2010,
Wow.
I think.
7 years to go through that process.
Yeah, it's a long process taking an idea from conception through to prototyping, and then you get something that's working and you can test it and you can run it. Then you have another set of things you have to do in terms of getting it approved, getting the FDA to approve it, getting it manufactured to standards where you can use it on patients and it's not going to get them sick. You're not going to have bacterial infections from that. And then getting it out in the marketplace. And then a third thing, getting the military to adopt it back into their kit. The Army funded the development of that device.
Cool.
And it may wind up being the last of the services to actually adopt it.
Oh, really?
Just because, they have really big formations of soldiers, and when they do something, it isn't. They aren't just buying one or two, right? They're buying 100,000 of them,
and having to train everybody in that.
And the
be
training,
enormous.
it's very, very key.
Wow. Okay, so when did you know you wanted to be a doctor? And then I know a lot of doctors, a lot of surgeons, but most of them aren't entrepreneurial like you, who've gone out and started at least 4 different companies that I know of. what was that process like going, okay, I want to be a doctor. Okay, I want to be a surgeon. Okay, I want to be a trauma surgeon. Okay, I'm going to start inventing stuff.
Well, I first started becoming interested in being a doctor way, way back when I was probably 12, 13 years old. I was a fan of MASH, the TV show.
Okay.
And Hawkeye Pierce.
Okay.
And the way in which he was in this awful situation, but maintained this very snarky sense of humor.
Okay.
And saving lives left and right. And
do you think that sense of humor is important in a trauma surgeon kind of environment?
you better have some sort of a sense of humor because there's some bad stuff happening around you.
Yeah.
And the people who can find a little bit of humor in those circumstances when it's appropriate,
Sure.
people like that are worth their weight in gold.
They can get everybody in the room to chill out and
Yeah,
focus.
it's one of the things that television gets completely wrong about emergency care and trauma care.
Okay.
For TV, it's always fast, and we're shouting, and you need to do this, and we're gonna talk like that, and let's all get this, and we gotta move now. Nobody does that.
Okay.
If you go to a place like Herman or Ben Taub and you start behaving like that, somebody's going to take you out back and they're going to put you in one of your MMA holds. They're going to say, "Let me tell you something, dude. You need to calm down."
Okay.
And it's a simple fact. As a surgeon, when you're young and you're doing this and you're like the adrenaline gets up,
Yeah.
right? You can't help it because it's new and you're inexperienced. When the adrenaline dumps
Okay.
and you're not excited anymore,
Uh-huh.
all the blood flow diverts away from your extremities back to your core, and your hands don't work, which is a bad circumstance
wow.
to be in as a surgeon.
Interesting.
And so we train people that you must remain calm. You must work, you have to control your breathing.
Yeah.
You're in charge of a team of people who take their cues from you.
Yeah.
And if you're losing your composure, your team is not going to perform well. And that's not what you as a patient would want to see from your team.
Mm-hmm.
Happily, the trauma systems are very, very well developed here in Houston. Memorial Hermann is the busiest trauma center in the country, year in, year out. Sometimes you get one that exceeds
Mm-hmm.
Hermann for a year or two, but over the long haul, it is the busiest trauma center in the country. And so we have these really well developed protocols and people who can implement those protocols on an ongoing basis that really function very, very well.
Wow. That's cool.
Yeah. We get military people who come and train
Yeah, I bet.
for whom, I hate to say this, but a Friday night in Houston has some characteristics of being a war zone in terms of
Oh
the
my
number of shootings, number of car accidents, the amount of mayhem that happens.
Yeah.
We get a lot of people here in Houston who are training to go get deployed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So is there a pretty extensive, I guess, training program at Hermann for these people? Like, is it just random, or is there kind of always an ongoing group coming in?
So there's always there's a couple of programs here in Houston. The one at Ben Taub is the one that gives a short period of training for people who are going to deploy.
Okay.
There's a few places in the country that do that. At Hermann, we have 2 or 3 residents who are training. They're doing their general surgery training, who are military military surgeons who are going to train as a general surgeon, get this trauma experience, and then they're going to be deployed with the Army or with the Air Force.
Got it.
To conflict zones.
Yeah, got it. And I know I have some other trauma surgeon buddies that practice in other places around the country, and they come here at times for, I don't know, a weekend or that sort of thing too. So
yeah, we run some programs, some training programs that are designed for surgeons from other places to come and just maybe get a weekend
Yeah.
maybe some exposure to specific techniques.
Yeah.
It's not just in the trauma surgery realm. Orthopedics is another big one.
Yeah, I
That
got a buddy in orthopedics
we
too.
have a lot of cutting edge techniques that are developed here in Houston.
Yeah.
And people are coming all the time to learn those techniques as well.
Okay. All right. So you like MASH, Hawkeye Pierce. You knew you wanted to be a doctor or a surgeon because of him, or
I was going to be a surgeon.
gonna
if
be
I
a
was going to
surgeon.
be a doctor.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
My parents, immigrants from India, really encouraged me to think about being a doctor. They're like, it's a very stable job. You'll always have a job if you're a doctor.
That's true.
Because the other thing I was thinking about was research and development, and doing the entrepreneurial thing. That was the other option, and they were like, "You should be a doctor, and if you
That's
want
a
to be an
guarantee.
entrepreneur, you could go do that later once you're a doctor.
Okay.
But you should be a doctor first." And I'm like, "All right, Mom, yes, absolutely." So went to medical school, University of Alabama. That's where I'm from.
Okay.
Born and raised Montgomery, Alabama. Roll Tide.
Nice.
Did my medical school there, and then came here to do residency training, largely because of Dr. Duke.
Okay.
Because he had been he had this syndicated health segment that was on the evening news
Okay.
when I was growing up. And most of the stuff wasn't surgical. It was about bee stings and allergies and things that, normal health problems. But at the end of that segment, it was always from the University of Texas Health Science Center in Houston. I'm Dr. Red Duke, with his mustache and his hat.
Yeah.
And I came here during my 4th year of medical school and did a rotation
Okay.
at MD Anderson, actually. But I did trauma call on a few nights over at Herman.
Okay.
And got to meet him and work with him a little bit, and just became a very huge fan of his.
Totally.
Yeah. And so came to do residency and train with him. And we ultimately became pretty good friends. I kind of came in at the tail end of Dr. Duke's career.
Okay.
And was probably the youngest person who was still willing to fight with him.
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, Red lived to argue and get mad and cut up, and I would poke him all the time. I'd be like, "Yeah, I guess that's how they used to do it back in 1875, Red. But it's a
Right.
little bit more modern now." He'd be, he would call me. His nickname for me was Horsefly, because I was always buzzing around and wanting to bite him on the ass, and
Right.
that was so. It just we had this wonderful relationship that. Because by the time I came up and became friends with him, he was very much this larger than life figure.
Yeah.
Everyone would see him in the hospital. "Oh my God, it's Dr. Duke," and I was very much not that way with him.
And he loved that. I'm
He
sure.
loved that, right?
Yeah.
He's a country boy
Yeah.
from South Texas. Went to A&M, Yale leader of the Aggies.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh
Cool.
yeah, just a very. I hate to put it this way, because in no way was Red ever really normal, but in that respect, kind of a normal dude.
Normal dude. Yeah.
And a great guy to be around. And he loved the whole TV and loved the attention. But I think towards the end, it started to be like, y'all can treat me like a normal person every once in a while too.
Yeah. And he lived at the hospital for a while, didn't he? Didn't they have an apartment
did.
up there?
So Red, the story goes that somebody, I don't know, disgruntled patient, disgruntled husband, somebody threatened to shoot Red.
No way.
For some reason. This was a long time
Oh
ago.
my gosh.
And so Red decided that he wasn't going to stop seeing his patients, because that was the most important thing in the world to him.
Okay.
We always used to say there's an easy way to do something, there's a wrong way to do something, and then there's the Red Duke way to something.
Okay.
Right? And it was never going to be the easiest way to do it.
Okay.
But you could be sure that it was the safe way to do it.
Okay.
Oftentimes it took a lot of effort, but his focus on his patients was really something remarkable. And so he decided he was just going to move to the hospital.
Okay.
Started rounding at midnight to 2 in the morning because he knew that there wouldn't be anybody else around. And I guess he decided that this is just, he liked it.
Okay.
So he had an apartment that he kept.
Yeah.
But he lived at the hospital. And so when they renovated the hospital and they built, now 2 buildings ago, the Herman Pavilion,
Okay.
they built an apartment for him on the top floor, just below the Life Flight helicopter.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, pads and Life Flight operations. And he had this apartment there. And so he lived there, and his dog, Jake, didn't go anywhere without Jake. And
So Jake was at the hospital.
oh yeah, he had a hospital ID badge for
the
the
dog?
dog. And so he
Oh
would
my God, what a
he would
character.
walk the dog around the hospital.
Wow.
And yeah, that was
You got to have some pretty good clout to get the hospital administration to build you an apartment at the hospital. That's pretty solid.
yeah. Red inspired an awful lot of loyalty with the people who worked with him.
Okay.
And those people over time became the people who ran the hospital, more or less. Certainly on the medical side, the operational side. And so the executive administration side comes in, they're like, who's this guy? You know,
Okay.
everybody's like, yeah, that's Red. You can't,
Yeah.
you know, you got to, you know, we love Red.
Yeah.
You can't mess with Red. And that was true for like the longtime nursing staff, in particular. Red was shameless about bribing the nurses, right?
What do you mean?
Well, he would go to the kitchen, he would grab a whole bunch of strawberries and grapes and stuff, and then he would take them and distribute them to the nurses.
Okay.
You know, particularly the operating room nurses, and you know, they just they loved him. They loved stuff. He'd do that every single day.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty darn cool. I wonder if there will ever be somebody else like him. And I mean, that's probably
No chance.
right.
No chance. The guy was an original. He was a truly unique product of Texas that anyone who were to try would be seen as trying and would fail in that regard. If somebody's a genuine cowboy that comes up through medical school 30, 40 years from now, maybe there'll be another one.
Right.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. But he's very much a product of the world he grew up
Yeah.
in. You know, country.
And he earned it. I mean, Lifelight being one of the fathers of that. I mean, that's a significant contribution to humanity. I mean,
There are so many people in Houston who are alive because of Red Duke.
Yeah.
Because of Lifelight, because of the attention that he gave to his patients and modeled that for an entire generation of surgeons.
wow.
Hundreds and hundreds. It's got to be in the thousands at this point of
Yeah.
physicians who he influenced, who have gone out and, he's been dead for 10 years now. I guarantee you, everyone who trained with him, you can still hear him when you're in the operating room and you're kind of trying to think of what you need to do. And it's not entirely straightforward. What would Red do here is a very, very good way to think about that. And then you think about it, you're like, oh, it's going to take me a long time. Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's the safe way to do it.
Yeah.
That's what he emulated every single minute of every day.
Wow. Okay, so you get to meet him, and that inspires you to get into trauma surgery.
Into trauma surgery. Yeah, it's kind of funny. The only time I think my mother's ever been really impressed with me and what I've done professionally, which I think is pretty cool,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Is is when I got to bring her to the hospital to meet Red.
Okay.
And she was like, finally,
Finally,
I believe that you've done something worthwhile.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I enjoy the rapid decision making that's required in order to do trauma surgery. But then also, I really like the physiology, the science of what happens when people are injured, thinking about how what you're doing now has downstream consequences 6 months or a year or 10 years down the road, even though you're in this moment and you have to act very, very quickly.
Yeah.
And it was, in fact, it was a discussion of that aspect of things where I first really connected with Red.
Yeah.
Was the whole idea of when you're making this decision in the first minutes of trauma, that patient is going to have to live with your decision for their whole life.
Yeah.
And the modern paradigm is people get injured, we take care of them as trauma surgeons, and then they go back to their primary care physician.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't how Red did it.
Okay.
He kept them
Really?
forever.
Really?
Forever. Yeah, and he didn't always have people coming back to see him, but yeah, he had this enormous practice of people that would come back and see him for regular, for their blood pressure medicine.
Wow.
Yeah, drove you crazy as a resident.
I bet.
You're like, okay, Dr. Duke, here's such and such, and he's here because his cholesterol is high and he doesn't believe his doctor and he needed to come see you. You're like, I'm here to be a surgeon, but this is Dr. Duke's clinic, and so we're going to do it the way he said. Because otherwise he's going to make you round at 2 a.m.
I love it when you said the fast decision making. My wife and I, the first time we went out to dinner with you and your wife, and we should note your wife is also a badass trauma surgeon herself, and hospital administrator now, and all sorts of cool stuff.
Yeah, she's the chief medical officer at Herman.
Yeah, total stud. So when we're having dinner with y'all, we got in the car. Did you notice how fast they knew what they wanted to eat? I'll have this, and this. Everybody else is going, I don't know. What are you going to have? I don't know. What do you have? Does the wine match with this steak? We're just boom, boom, boom. So it's
3 rules of surgery.
Okay.
Okay. Eat when you can.
Okay.
Sleep when you can.
Okay.
Don't mess with the pancreas. And the first rule of those is eat when you can.
Right.
Right? Because if you get the opportunity to eat, you better go ahead and eat, because that dang pager might go off.
Yeah.
And at Herman, it always does go off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's funny. You're not the first person who's ever told us that.
That's awesome.
And our kids have not yet figured that out yet, that they need to go fast. We're trying to train them to eat a little faster.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so I've got a lot I want to cover with you. I really wanted to get into some brain stuff, but can you give us just a brief overview? I know you've got 4 different companies currently. Give us kind of an overview, and then let's dive into some brain stuff.
Sure. The first company is the fluid warming company.
Yeah.
I wish I had brought one with me. I'll get you one later on.
Cool.
That's called Emit Corporation. The second company I founded was called Coagulex.
Okay.
It is a microchip that does blood clotting diagnostics.
Okay. Which I understand what those words mean, but when you put them all together like that, can you break that down for us?
Right. So blood clotting is a dynamic thing. It's not just the blood kind of firms up and forms a plug.
Okay.
It's actually an active substance that has the same proteins in the platelets that contract the same way that muscle does.
Okay.
And so actin and myosin. And so the blood clot forms, it gets sticky, and then it pulls in on everything around it really, really hard, just like muscle does, in order to close off the hole where the bleeding is, and to be able to sit there against the force of blood pressure happening every heartbeat.
Okay.
Okay. The Coagulex device is a microchip that we put a drop of blood on it and let it clot. And then as it is contracting, as the forces are pulling inward on that blood clot, it measures that force.
Wow.
Which is it's a readout of what's going on under the hood in that blood clot. The more force that you're able to produce, the less likely you are to bleed to death.
Okay.
And conversely, we're working on how to tease out which aspect of that force generation needs to be treated in people who have not enough force being generated. In order to say, all right, this person needs fibrinogen.
That's
this
wild.
person needs something else.
So can you tell, okay, this guy's in great shape. Is he more likely to have strong force?
Absolutely.
Okay, so the sort of comorbidities play a role in that.
Yeah, well, to some extent, but people who are, unless you're very, very sick, your blood clotting tends to be pretty well preserved.
Okay.
It's one of those things that you've got to be very, very sick
Okay.
before your blood clotting gets out of whack.
Okay.
It's one of the things that really sticks around to the very, very end.
Yeah.
And so it's a great indicator of if it's low, it's a great indicator that this person's got a bleeding problem related to their injury that we can give product back and make that better.
Wow, that's super cool. Okay, so sorry, we're jumping around everywhere, but what was it like, being a trauma surgeon and then developing, I mean, that's sort of doing two things at once, right? Developing products and starting a company and all that. What was that process like in the decision making to do that?
Yeah. So when you develop a product, you have to do something to get it out to market.
Okay.
If you're developing a medical product, you either have to sell it to a big pharma company, a Baxter or an Abbott or a J&J, or you have to build a company that's going to then market it.
Mm-hmm.
And the first of those pathways, very straightforward. You sell it, they buy it, they give you, some small royalty associated with it.
Okay.
And then it's up to them what they're going to do with it.
Okay.
All right. Sometimes that means they're going to develop it properly. They're going to market it. They're going to have their sales reps sell it. It's going to get out there and it's going to make a big difference. Sometimes they buy it and put it on a shelf and never do anything with it.
Okay.
And so I didn't want that.
Yeah, it's a gamble, sure.
Well, after you put enough effort into developing something, you want it to get out there and make a difference. At least
Yeah.
that's why we do it.
Right.
And so keeping more control over it is kind of the impetus behind forming a startup company around it. There's still a lot of risk associated with that.
Yeah.
Probably 2/3 of medical startups, maybe 3/4 of them fail at some stage.
Yeah.
Either run out of capital or the device turns out doesn't work.
Yeah.
Or FDA says no go.
Yeah.
All of those are possibilities. So far, we haven't run into those kinds of roadblocks with any of these companies yet. But they've gotten the first one was the simplest. The second one is more complex. The third company, Salvation, is the most complex. It's a therapeutic company, not a device.
Okay.
Salvation is commercializing stem cells for traumatic brain injury.
Yeah.
And traumatic brain injury, big problem.
Yep.
Probably the single most lethal condition anywhere in the world for which there is no treatment.
Okay. And can you break down traumatic brain injury? Does that mean blow to the head? Does that mean, blood clot. What does that mean?
Traumatic brain injury involves physical blow to the
Physical
head.
blow to the head.
Yeah.
Okay.
You get a clot in your brain, that's a stroke.
Okay.
Some of the mechanisms are similar
Okay.
injury wise, and so we do have a footprint in stroke as well. But traumatic brain injury is I'm in a car accident, I get T-boned, and the side of my head hits the window.
Right.
That's what side curtain airbags were invented for.
Okay. Or someone who's older who falls, doesn't break their hip, but kind of bonks their head a little bit.
Incredibly common.
Incredibly common. And
yes.
Advice is to get them to go get imaged, right? I mean, even though you might feel okay.
Anyone who loses consciousness,
okay,
particularly if you're older than 60, needs to go to the ER and get their brain imaged. And the reason is that there is a bleeding problem called an epidural hematoma.
Okay.
Where you're knocked out and you wake up and you have what we call a lucid interval where, oh no, I'm okay, my head hurts a little bit, while that thing is growing in size.
Okay.
Then they lose consciousness a second time, and you had better be very, very close to a hospital or in a hospital when that happens, because that means that the blood is expanding because of the bleeding in there. And if that person doesn't get to an operating room with a neurosurgeon pronto, they're going to die.
Yeah.
Traumatic brain injury, the most common mechanism of TBI is motor vehicle crash.
Okay.
Falls are the second.
Okay.
Sports are becoming another big one. There's a lot of emphasis on TBI in all contact sports. Football, of course, is the biggest one. MMA, like you're obviously involved with. The striking portions of MMA are designed to create a concussion.
Yeah.
That's what the whole point of it is.
Yep.
In MMA. But it isn't just those really obvious ones. Basketball,
Okay.
soccer, baseball.
Yep.
They're all associated with traumatic brain injury. Some of the most interesting research in mild traumatic brain injury is from young women playing soccer who head the ball.
Wow. So they don't lose consciousness.
No.
They're just getting multiple bonks to the head.
Repetitive force to the skull, even if it doesn't knock you out, is going to eventually cause damage.
Okay.
Period. There's no known threshold for safety in any of this. And I want to step back for a second.
Yeah.
My son plays soccer.
Yeah.
I'm not saying don't anyone go play sports.
Sure.
I'm saying that we as parents and people and physicians, anyone who's dealing with sports needs to understand this and have the right amount of care involved in blows to the head, because there is no safe level for them. And the reason why I can tell you why I know this, the mechanism behind chronic brain injury, CTE, like we see in football. And now I'm giving you my opinion, but it's based on a fair understanding of the science.
Yep.
When there is repeated blows to the head, you have this thing in your brain called the blood-brain barrier. Okay.
Okay.
If we think about the brain, if we think about the brain as kind of a parasite that's living in your body
Okay.
and controlling it,
Okay.
that your body wants to get rid of.
Okay.
I know this is weird.
Yep.
Okay. Your brain is separated from your body by this thing called the blood-brain barrier, so that your blood and your white blood cells don't ever see your brain, because if they see your brain, they attack it.
Wow.
Just like they do a bacterium or any other foreign invader.
Wow.
Okay. This is known science.
Okay.
We do a lot of science on the blood-brain barrier. When you have blows to the head, repeated blows to the head, you get a little disruption of the blood-brain barrier. And so your white blood cells then see brain tissue for the first time and start forming antibodies against your own brain.
Wow.
Just like they would against a cold virus, a bacterium, a splinter in your finger. This is what your blood does.
Wow.
Okay? That's fine until the next time you have a disruption of your blood-brain barrier, and then you already have antibodies to your own brain. And so those antibodies will now start to attack your brain, which is why repetitive brain blows over time result in an ongoing chronic injury that's very destructive.
Wow.
If you do something like play football and you have concussions,
Okay.
where you get a major disruption to your blood-brain barrier,
Okay.
your antibodies are exposed to your brain, or your brain's exposed to those antibodies for an extended period of time.
Okay.
That's not good.
That's not good.
And so some people, even after they finish playing, their barrier is permanently disrupted.
Okay.
And that's why they go on to develop progressive symptoms over time, well after the period of time where they've stopped playing.
Got it.
That's the progressive nature of CTE.
It just slowly eats away at it.
It is literally eating away at the brain. And when you see it on autopsy, it's not subtle.
Really.
These people are losing 30% of their brain tissue.
And when you say losing, it just what happens to it?
It's being digested by the
That's
white blood cells.
nuts.
The white blood cells attack it just like they do a bacterium. They take pieces of it, engulf it, and destroy it.
That is nuts.
It is crazy.
Literally, it's like they view it as a parasite and go after it. Wow.
Which is why I started this by saying, if you think about the brain,
Yeah.
we don't think about our. I like my brain.
Right,
It's
right.
pretty important to me.
Right.
Right. But my blood cells don't look at my brain that way.
That's wild. Okay.
This is why the health of the blood-brain barrier, particularly in children, needs to be protected. The earlier this starts, the longer time you have of exposure during play, during the time, because nobody plays football forever,
Right.
right? So if you start early,
So elementary school kid starts playing tackle football.
play and tackle, get their bell rung.
Yep.
You don't want this in a developing brain,
Okay.
okay? I get it. I'm from Alabama. I give you a roll tide. I love college football.
Yeah.
I at the same time, every one of my friends who asks me as an expert in traumatic brain injury,
Right.
like, no, you should not be having tackle football right now.
Yeah.
Your son's 8 years old. He's
Yeah.
10 years old. When should he tackle? When can we start playing tackle football? I'm like, as late as you possibly can.
Wow.
I don't know what age that is.
Yeah.
12. Certainly by the time you're 14, you're in high school, you have to be tackling, I think, in order
Yeah.
to play. But it's the hitting.
The hitting.
The
Yeah.
linesmen coming together, head to head,
Yeah.
the hits in the tackling, they're all dangerous.
Yeah. And is there anything that one could do, whether it's a supplement or a practice or meditation or anything to help reverse any of that? Or is it?
You can play golf.
Okay.
I mean, there is nothing.
There's nothing.
There's nothing right now. So there are things on the horizon.
Okay.
I mentioned that we have a research program in stem cell therapy.
Yep.
Our research is in severe traumatic brain injury. This isn't what we're talking about right now. We're talking about people who high-speed car crash, head impacts the window, the steering wheel or something. They're in a coma.
Okay.
They're in the ICU. They've got a machine breathing for them. They've got a drain pulling fluid out of theirs so that their brain doesn't swell and pop out through the base of their skull.
Wow.
We just finished phase 2 trials in adults and kids for severe traumatic brain injury with promising results.
Okay.
It is certainly possible that there will be a use for stem cells for less severe TBI that we're talking about.
Okay.
Okay. It's possible. It's hard to do research on mild TBI.
Okay.
Parents and players don't want to be labeled as having had a brain injury.
Sure.
It's not, does he have a brain injury? It's, do I have to tell the people from the colleges that he had a brain injury?
Okay.
And so it's, if I get a scan, we have a scan for chronic brain injury. It's a combined MRI PET scan where we can see ongoing inflammation in somebody who isn't playing anymore.
Wow.
Who's going to want to be in that trial?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
That's tough.
So you might think that the people who aren't playing anymore would want to be in that trial. But then let's say that let's say you do that. You find something.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Should you then start applying that to people who are still playing?
Yeah.
You should, shouldn't you?
Yeah.
Okay. But then that person's like, Doc, I got this scan. What are we going to do about this now? You can't, because I can't play.
Yeah.
I can't get paid.
Yeah.
But how long am I going to be out?
Yeah.
6 weeks, 6 months, 2 years until the scan becomes normal?
Yeah.
It's a big set of issues around particularly professional sports that trickles down because two-thirds of parents think that their kid is going to get a scholarship to play whatever the sport is that they play.
Sure.
Okay. The concussion will derail that. And so it's not a question, did my kid actually have a concussion? It's, do I have to say my kid had a concussion?
Yeah, they sweep it under the rug. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let me ask you this. So, a kid in high school has a couple concussions. 20 years later, 30 years later, let's say it's been chewing on his brain, right? Certain percentage of the brain. What are the visible symptoms? Is this person experiencing depression?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mood changes, depression, behavioral changes, suicidal thoughts, anger, acting out, confusion, memory loss.
Addiction.
Addiction can be part of it. There's no clear association between CTA and addiction that I know of.
Okay.
But I suspect it's there under the surface if it hasn't been shown already.
Yeah. So I think that's something a lot of people don't look at. You know, if you see somebody in their 40s or 50s going through a super tough time with depression, that sort of thing, nobody ever goes, well, dang, they did have 3 concussions in high school, you know?
I think they're starting to now.
Okay.
Yeah. Those are the people who we would love to do a trial on this.
Yeah.
Because we have a scan, we have a therapy for it, right? The stem cell therapy we do for people with severe TBI. We started a trial with kids with cerebral palsy, which is a form of chronic brain injury.
Interesting.
I know it's obviously a very acute thing that happens at birth, but there is a chronic aspect to it as well. We take bone marrow from somebody's hip, from the person, not somebody, from the person who has the injury.
Yep.
We spin out the stem cells from their bone marrow,
Yep.
give them back to them in a big slug.
Okay.
And it alters the way in which it does two things that we've demonstrated. It improves the integrity of the blood-brain barrier, and it alters the way in which the immune cells act relative to the brain
Okay.
in such a way as to reduce the amount of brain loss. So when somebody has a severe traumatic brain injury, their brain gets the impact, and then the dead tissue starts getting digested, but then the live tissue around it also gets digested,
Okay.
eaten up, same way we're talking about here.
Yep.
And so your brain loses tissue for a year
Okay.
after a severe TBI.
Continues to
lose
Yeah.
tissue for a year. We've shown on imaging that stem cell treatment can stop that process.
Stops it.
Stops it.
And is stem cell is IV or is it local
It's
injection?
IV.
IV.
Yeah. It's you get a bone marrow, you get a big needle in your hip, do some stuff to that bone marrow in the lab, and then give you an IV infusion of your own stem cells back.
And if somebody had, say, had a bunch of concussions 20 years ago and they got the stem cell treatment now, would that still?
We don't know.
We don't know.
We
To
hope.
be determined.
That
Yeah.
we would have to try it.
Yeah. And so I've heard a lot about stem cells in other countries that's not FDA approved here with, I guess, is it through the umbilical cord?
It's umbilical cord blood is the source of those stem cells.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I looked into it. I have a torn meniscus, and there's a place in Panama, a place in Mexico, and a place in Colombia, and I reached out to all of them. It's sort of it gets hyped up online right now. It was expensive. It was $20,000 to $30,000 to go there. They were going to do a local injection and a IV and some other treatments and stuff too. I wasn't convinced it was going to help my meniscus tear. I'm sure getting a boost of stem cells would help all sorts of stuff in my body. But, what are your thoughts on that?
There's nothing that helps cartilage.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the idea that you could get a stem cell injection, it's going to fix your cartilage problem,
Yeah.
non-starter.
Okay.
It's interesting that the stem cell protocols, I just looked at one in Colombia for a friend of mine. It bears a more than passing resemblance to our protocol for brain injury. Like, it's entirely likely that they just lifted it wholesale from our FDA application. So it's hard for me to say we don't think that's going to work.
Yeah.
Except that we're doing it for severe traumatic brain injury. There's no way to understand whether it's going to work for your Parkinson's
Okay.
or whatever it is that you want to have happen. Stem cells, this whole idea that you give somebody stem cells and they somehow know that they need to differentiate into some other kind of cell to repair what's going on. We tried that. We as a scientific community and us, we also tried it for 15 years. It doesn't happen.
Okay.
Okay. So the idea that you give you a slug of stem cells and they go to your heart and they turn into heart and now
Yeah.
you have more heart, that doesn't happen.
Okay.
Okay. Doesn't happen to your brain, doesn't happen to heart, certainly doesn't happen to cartilage.
Okay.
Okay. What it does do is it changes the way in which your body responds to injury. It works best if there is an injury to respond to, as opposed to something where the injury happened and there's no ongoing inflammation to affect.
Okay.
Okay. So your 15-year-old meniscus injury or however old it is,
Yeah.
way too late.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's why we're using them for acute traumatic brain injury. That's the best possible scenario because we can give that to them within the first 48 hours after the injury happens.
Yeah.
That's when it's most likely to have an effect.
Yeah. Any negative side effects to stem cells that anybody's seen?
Yes. So the big ones are blood clots. Depending on which tissue your stem cells came from, they can induce clotting based on a specific factor that's on the surface of those cells. And in fact, our lab published a series of papers on this side effect, showing that there's a whole range. Amniotic fluid stem cells are the worst, and nobody should ever use those for anything.
Yep.
Umbilical cord stem cells are pretty good in this regard.
Okay.
Bone marrow mononuclear cells, like you get from your own bone marrow,
Yeah.
are the best, but you don't ever get those in a clinic because of the way they have to be produced.
Got it. It's a pretty invasive procedure.
Well, it requires you to know how to process bone marrow to specifically get those stem cells. The clinics that you're talking about
Yeah.
in other countries that are unregulated, they don't have that expertise.
Got it.
Okay, they rely on somebody else to give them their stem cells.
Yeah.
Those people in turn are relying on some source of cells that they have that's a regular source of cells that they can use.
Yes.
That they can get cheaply.
Get cheaply.
Yeah.
And I've heard them brag about there's more stem cells, the method they use versus the bone marrow one. Is that accurate or?
That's probably true.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you can grow those in a culture dish, but you can do that with bone marrow stem cells too.
Okay. And do they multiply when you put them back in your body? Is there a time period that happens?
No,
No.
no. Pretty much the dose that you get is the dose that you get.
Yeah.
There's kind of a standard dose, 10 million cells per kilogram.
Okay.
That's sort of everybody's coning in on as the dose that gives you the effect that you need without, because you start piling in more cells, you're just going to induce more blood clots.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. And the clotting, how would you know if you're a person that's more likely to clot versus is there
It's
a way
really hard to tell.
It's really hard to tell, yeah.
Yeah.
So is the clotting, I know you don't have like exact numbers, but like, is it super risky or is it like, yeah, one out of every, you know?
It's probably more like more on the latter side of what you just
Yeah.
said. But a lot of it depends on the cells.
Okay.
Okay. If you go to a place where they've treated 5,000 people
Okay.
that haven't had an enormous number of blood clots, flying home from one of these places is itself a risk factor
Yeah.
for blood clotting.
For clotting, yeah. Yeah.
It's probably more on the not too big a problem
Yeah.
side of things, but it is a risk benefit calculation that's very, very hard for a non-physician to make.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Particularly when the benefit is also very unclear, right?
Sure.
People
Hard to
want stem cells to work. I want them to work.
Yeah.
We've worked for 25 years trying to make them work,
Right.
and we have a disease and a specific protocol where we're beginning to be pretty sure it works.
Yeah.
That's taken a long time. So people want the promise of some sort of a benefit where one may or may not exist. There may be one there. There also may not be one there. At this point right now, you're paying your money and you're taking your chances.
Yeah. Yeah. And is there, I guess there's nothing you could do. I mean, clotting, taking aspirin, I mean, or is this pretty.
Taking aspirin probably would help.
Yeah. Yeah. And how far out do you think we are? So TBI sounds like the first main place stem cells are going to become common in
No,
treatment?
there's a couple of places that it's already happened, but they're very niche. There's something called graft versus host disease, which
Okay.
is for people who have leukemia and have undergone A stem cell transplant, I mean, that's really niche. There's a specific stem cell treatment for people who are having that particular complication of a stem cell transplant after they've had leukemia treatment. That's the
Okay.
kind of thing where there isn't a treatment. There is a treatment that one is FDA approved
Okay.
for stem cells. For large scale things like stroke, heart attack, brain injury, there are things in phase 3 trials, the last trial that
Oh,
needs
cool.
to happen, that are happening.
Cool.
Yeah.
And so that timeline is 5 years, 3 years?
5 years.
Yeah.
Some of them are probably sooner than that.
Cool.
Yeah.
So we're living in a pretty cool age where this is kind of a new biohack, stem cells, and kind of a new frontier of how they can help
Absolutely.
all sorts of different ailments.
Absolutely. We're living in an age where there's a really, really large number of things that are in the pipeline that have been developed over the last 20 or 25 years. You've heard of the mRNA vaccines?
Yeah.
All this COVID stuff is meaningless. That's not what they were invented for. They were invented so that you could take somebody's cancer
Mm-hmm.
and take the RNA cell surface expression from their cancer, put in a vaccine, and give it back to them.
And that vaccine would help cancer.
Not it. We just saw last week the first trial in people with pancreatic cancer.
Wow.
The thing that if you get the diagnosis, there's a 99% chance you're going to be dead.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. I'm
First
familiar.
trial just showed near miraculous results
Unbelievable.
for pancreatic cancer. Now, when I was in medical school, the treatment for pancreatic cancer was called the 6FP protocol. Give them a 6-pack and a fishing pole
Wow.
and say, enjoy the rest of your time.
Yeah.
Now, there's the possibility of that actually being a successful outcome.
Wow.
These are cures we're talking about.
Wow.
And it's not just that. There's checkpoint inhibitors. There's things called CAR T cells the immunotherapy that Jim Allison from MD Anderson just won the Nobel Prize for.
Okay.
That was it was nuts. When I was in residency, I participated in the trials where we took patients with melanomas and just harvested the melanomas from their body.
Okay.
Big baseball-sized chunks of melanoma
Wow.
that they needed because they needed that much tissue to generate the first vaccines that they were making at the time.
Wow.
And now we turn around and those things are curing people.
Wow.
Yeah, there's some amazing stuff in the pipeline, and stem cells are just one of them.
Wow. Yeah, I've heard of, with cancer, I know that obviously there's certain types of cancer that your odds are better and odds are worse, but the quicker you catch it is key, right? If you're in phase 1, catching it quicker. But it sounds like if some of this stuff hits, it might be curable almost at any stage.
We're learning how to leverage the immune system in order to let your body recognize the cancer as the foreign invader, the parasite that it is, and attack it. That's the most efficient way to take care of any problem in the body, is to utilize the body's natural defense system.
Mm-hmm.
Cancer is a problem because it evades that, evades recognition by your body's attack mechanism.
So you're helping the body go, hey, this is the enemy, go get it.
We're painting a big, bright, flashing dot on the enemy and saying, drop your bomb right here.
Wow. That's through the mRNA.
The mRNA vaccines are are the newest and probably the most versatile of the techniques that are coming out. And this is what they were invented for.
And how long have they been in the pipe?
Probably 20 years now.
Okay.
Clinical trials had been ongoing for about 10 years when COVID came out.
Yeah.
And so they just diverted the technique to the COVID spike
Sure.
protein.
Sure.
But we knew it worked.
Yeah. Yeah. So, all right. So maybe in the next 5 years. By the time Elon Musk lands on Mars, we'll have cured cancer.
There will be cures. Well, there are cures now.
Okay.
The pancreatic cancer trial I just told you about, those are real people who went through that trial. Only a handful, because that's how you start.
Yeah.
But the one good thing about COVID is we know how to manufacture that guy in bulk
Oh, okay, cool.
now, right?
That is-
Those problems, typically the scale up problem for something brand new
Yeah.
that you have to work out, don't have to work that out.
Yeah. Got
That
the
was
playbook
the
for that.
warp speed. What was it called? Operation Warp Speed.
Yeah.
The scale out of those vaccines for COVID are now going to be leveraged for all of these impossible to treat cancers.
Wow, that's cool.
So I would say 5 years from now, we will see that to be routine in 5 years.
No kidding.
I think it's going to be faster than just about anything else because of the fact that the technology itself had this enormous test bed during COVID.
Wow. So that's a major pro to have all of us that went through this COVID thing. That's one of the
Even that cloud has a silver lining.
Wow.
And we're gonna the people who are our age now,
mm-hmm.
our parents are getting older,
Mm-hmm.
gonna be getting these diagnoses.
Mm-hmm.
They are going to see the benefit of this very, very soon.
Super cool.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, back to the brain. Whether I've got my bell rung once or twice or not, what are just some best practices I can do to ensure, better the odds for dementia, anything as I age, and I want to keep my noodle sharp.
Best practices for brain health is really what you're saying.
Yeah.
Avoid getting your bell rung.
Okay.
Okay. There's no safe threshold for getting knocked in the head. Wearing a helmet for those things where you are likely to get knocked in the head.
We just did some river rafting and snow skiing, all that stuff.
Snow skiing, whitewater rafting. These are things when we were kids
Yeah.
that nobody wore helmets
That's true.
for.
Riding a bike, all that stuff.
Riding a bike?
Yeah.
Did you wear a helmet riding a bike?
Nope.
No. Now it's routine, and it's really a good thing
Yeah.
that you wear a helmet for just about everything.
Yeah.
Okay. Things that are less obvious that may help.
All right. So supplements, what can we do in the supplement world for our
So
brains?
let's talk about supplements. For brain health,
Okay.
there are a number of things that we think are probably beneficial.
Okay.
Brain cells do not reproduce. They don't really divide. They don't regenerate themselves. And so one of the most important things to do for brain health is to keep them from dying, from being injured in the first place.
Okay.
Okay. Anti-inflammatory is a big one because inflammation is one of the ways in which we lose brain cells.
And can inflammation, I know we talked about a traumatic brain injury, but can inflammation come from other things?
Sure, absolutely. It can come just from being sick for other reasons.
Okay.
It can come from specific conditions that we have, particularly autoimmune conditions where your body is activating its own immune system against itself.
Is that like an MS or?
A lot of autoimmune diseases, so lupus is a big
Okay.
systemic one.
Sure.
There are a lot of skin conditions, eczema, psoriasis are some that are very, very common. Scleroderma is a big one. There are quite a few of them. MS, we don't think is autoimmune, but I don't know that that's
Okay.
100%.
But that's like the myelin sheath getting deteriorated.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The sheath of your myelinated neurons, the ones that are white matter,
Yeah.
deteriorates in MS.
And is that from inflammation, or that we don't really know what causes it?
So some of it's genetic, some of it is inflammatory, but I don't know if it's autoimmune.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
I'm with you. Okay.
In terms of supplements that help brain health, general antioxidants are thought to be pretty useful. Those would include a lot of the various berries.
Okay.
One of the ones that's very hip these days right now is methylene blue.
Yeah, yeah. I've heard a lot about that recently. Now,
there's-
what does that come from? Is that a berry?
Methylene blue? No, methylene blue is an organic dye. It's a chemical.
Okay, so that seems counterproductive. I mean, it's counterintuitive. It's a chemical dye for, like,
It was invented
fabrics,
as
or-
a reaction indicator for acid-base oxidation reduction chemistry. Yeah, I mean it is literally an organic chemical.
Okay.
And that's what it's used for a lot in chemistry labs.
Okay.
In
And then so people just figured out, hey, it's actually, if you take it in this way, helpful.
we don't know that it's actually helpful.
Okay, got it. It's kind of new buzz thing right now.
It is very buzzy, I think, because it predates the Robert F. Kennedy thing.
Okay.
He's very visibly been using it, but over the last 10-ish years, it's become very hip. If I'm going to be 100% honest, I think people like it because it turns your urine blue.
Does it really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
wild.
Quite a.
I hadn't heard that part.
Quite a dramatic shade of
Oh,
blue.
good party trick. Huh?
Yeah. In medical school, you learn the things that turn your pee different colors.
Oh, that's funny.
You know,
That's funny.
rifampin, an antibiotic that is used for meningitis, turns your urine this incredible shade of orange.
Oh, wow.
There are things that turn it red, turn it green. Anyway, methylene blue will turn your pee blue.
Okay.
It is actually used in medicine
Okay.
for the treatment of. So when we talk about antioxidants, the oxide thing we're talking about are oxygen derivatives that are highly reactive. Okay, meaning they want to react with something in your body and deliver a little jolt of chemical energy at them.
Okay.
Okay. When we talked about your immune cells destroying invaders, destroying brain tissue, they generate a bunch of these oxide radicals in order to create that destruction.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it's a normal part of inflammation. A lot of people think that it is responsible for sort of the slow phase of ongoing aging and age-related loss of function.
Okay.
Okay. There is a natural production of these free radicals, particularly nitric oxide,
Okay.
that has functions related to regulation of your blood pressure
Okay.
that's always ongoing. And in fact, a guy named Fred Murad from our medical school won a Nobel Prize for figuring that out.
Okay.
These free radical oxygen derivatives are the target of methylene blue and all of the other antioxidant supplements that exist.
Okay.
Okay. Methylene blue is actually used in medicine for treating the effect of a specific therapy called inhaled nitric oxide. I mentioned that it has this effect on blood pressure. There are specific kinds of respiratory failure where you need to alter the way in which your blood circulates between your heart and lungs
Okay.
in order to treat that failure.
And methylene blue is a supplement, not an FDA approved.
No, I think it's an FDA. It's FDA approved for a specific use.
So can I buy it over the counter, or it has to be
you
prescription?
can because it's a chemical dye.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, it's not only sold
Okay.
for medical purposes or supplement purposes.
And as far as dosing goes, is this just like I Google it and wing it, or
Yeah, you're going to Google it and do what people tell you to on Google.
yeah?
But those are based on an actual approved use for this nitric oxide treatment.
Okay.
If you this nitric oxide puts so many radicals into your body that it actually changes the configuration of your hemoglobin.
Wow.
And methylene blue does the opposite of the oxide, does the reduce, oxidation reduction, or the two sides of the coin. Anyway, methylene blue does have a use.
And aside from blue pea, are there negative side effects?
Yes.
Okay.
Methylene blue has known effects on brain chemistry.
Okay.
In particular, it's an inhibitor of a specific enzyme, MAO, that is related to serotonin metabolism. And so it can create over time depressive symptoms. But the big problem that it has is that because it's so chemically active, it has a lot of interactions with a lot of other drugs, some of which are very unpredictable. So if you're otherwise healthy, you're taking no medications at all, and you want to take a dose of methylene blue, have at it. Great party trick. You turn the toilet bowl blue.
Okay.
Okay. On a chronic basis, there are problems with the idea of taking methylene blue
Okay.
all the time.
Okay.
I would be very, very careful about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
If you want an antioxidant, there are lots of less aggressive ones that you can take.
I would assume so. Eat
Yes.
some blueberries rather than drink some chemical
You got
dye.
it.
Yeah.
If you're into some of the more holistic medicine stuff, the acai, the
Yeah.
goji,
Yeah.
those, but any berry that's colored has an antioxidant in it.
Okay.
The colored stuff in berries, strawberries.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have a little bit of it.
And that's great for the brain.
That's great for the brain.
Okay.
Okay. On a more specific level, my company, we haven't talked about my last company yet. Essential Nutrition is a supplement company working on supplements that have a strong scientific basis behind their action.
Okay.
There are a lot of claims that are made about supplements,
Okay.
nearly all of which have no basis in actual science.
Got it.
Okay.
Because they don't require the rigor to go through the FDA and all that. So anybody can sort of. create
That's
something to
exactly
take to
right.
market.
Supplements are food products.
Yeah.
And you're not supposed to make claims about a food product that haven't been tested scientifically, but people do it all the time.
Okay.
And it becomes very, very hard for any normal consumer to try and figure out, is this real? Is this really going to help me? You know, there's so much hype about all of this. My company, Essential Nutrition, is focused on trying to demystify some of the supplements that actually have a lot of science around them.
Okay.
Okay. The first one we've worked out, which is called Trumeric.
Yeah.
You got a bottle of that here?
Yeah, I got some.
All right. Yeah. So Trumeric is a combination of the stuff that's in turmeric. It's TRUE, Meric, Trumeric.com. A combination of the stuff that's in turmeric, which is called curcumin, and the primary ingredient in hemp, which is CBD.
Okay.
It turns out that both of those compounds have a broad array of anti-inflammatory activities.
Okay.
And this is this I would call this at this point established science.
Okay.
There's hundreds of studies on the cells that form our immune system, the reactions they have to these two compounds. We know the mechanisms. We know what the changes in cell expression are. We can reproduce those and are reproducing those in my own lab.
Okay.
So it's not To me, this one is not hype. All
Got
right?
it. Is
And
CBD in general or
these are activities of CBD
right?
and curcumin.
Yeah.
Okay. And the reason why I created Turmeric, it's kind of funny. My mother, who we've already talked about, is kind of a hard ass.
Yeah.
Um,
Shout out to mom.
yeah, mom. Love mom. Uh, she said, I'm getting a little bit older. My hands hurt when I chop vegetables. My knees hurt when I'm trying to walk around. You know, I sent you to Harvard.
Right.
I sent you to medical school. Not you went. I sent you to
Right.
medical school.
Right.
What good are you?
Right.
And when your mother says that to you,
You better produce.
challenge accepted. You better be the answer,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so I got it looking at curcumin because my mom's from India. She said you should look at turmeric.
Mm-hmm.
And so I figure if I'm going to make mom happy, I'm going to look at turmeric. And it
I love
turns
it.
out that mom is right.
Okay.
Very annoying.
Yeah.
Very annoying when your mother turns out to be right about your profession.
That's funny.
There's a lot of science behind turmeric and inflammation.
Okay.
And it works in a couple of different ways. And I got to looking at what could I do to kind of help that work. And I started looking at CBD, which works in a couple of other ways.
Okay.
And so the combination of these together gives you a really broad anti-inflammatory activity.
And again, just to dumb it down for me a little, anti-inflammatory. So I tweak my meniscus and my knee swells up. That could be a source of inflammation. Say I go eat a bunch of Mexican food and burgers and fries and queso and da. That can sort of get my body inflamed. Does this help with both of those scenarios?
Absolutely.
Okay.
In fact, it is a general anti-inflammatory that we've now given it to a few hundred people at
Yeah.
this point. People with skin conditions have seen improvement if that's their primary problem.
Like what do you mean skin condition?
So autoimmune psoriasis,
Okay.
we've had people who have had dramatic improvement in itching.
So that's not considered inflammation, is it?
Oh, it is.
Oh, it is.
Absolutely,
I didn't realize that. Okay, got it.
Yeah. But the biggest use is in people with joint pain, muscle pain, where even my mother has seen a great deal of improvement.
Yeah.
I told you there were 2 times where I ever impressed my mother. One was when I introduced her to Red Duke.
Yeah.
The other was when she had taken my supplement for a week and is now a firm believer.
Nice, man.
She takes it every day.
And a natural supplement like this is better for you than an Advil or a Mobic or something like.
So it is certainly more effective over a broad range of conditions
Interesting.
because it has a wide number of targets in inflammation.
Got it.
All right. Inflammation, like blood clotting, is one of these things that keeps you alive. Okay.
Okay.
Inflammation is necessary to keep you alive
Okay.
for fighting off infections.
Interesting.
Okay. That's where inflammation, that's why we have inflammation.
Oh, so my body's under attack, so the inflammation slows all that down, or
No, your inflammation is what
what
is
is
what the attack is against
it.
the invader.
that's the offense.
right?
Yeah.
And it would be nice if it were only ever activated against invading pathogens.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
But it can be activated from normal activity, from diet,
From gluten or
from
whatever.
Gluten's a big one.
Yeah.
Yes. And so it is our everyday interactions with our environment and our diet, our activities that create inflammation that we don't find helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But because inflammation is necessary for survival, in order to exist in a world that's full of germs,
Mm-hmm.
okay, things like that in our body never have just one pathway. They always have a whole bunch of ways for that to get activated. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
That's true for all things like inflammation. And so a drug like Motrin,
Mm-hmm.
a single agent, works on one pathway.
Okay.
Most of the time in your body, you knock out one pathway, the other ones will take over. That's a feature.
Okay.
except when you're the one hurting and you've taken your Advil and your Advil's not working anymore.
Got it.
That's why for people with chronic arthritis, it stops working after a while.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
Because those only work on one aspect, one pathway of inflammation when you might have 10.
And in that you knock that one out, but those other 9 make up for the one that's been knocked out.
They crank up.
They crank up.
They get more active when the other one becomes less active. We call that balance.
Yeah.
Which is great when it's something you want.
Right.
Not so great when it's painful.
Yeah.
Right? So in that respect, we think that this is a much more promising avenue to attack inflammation.
Okay. And so to bring it back, don't get your bell rung, wear a helmet, and keep inflammation down.
Keep inflammation down.
And inflammation could be caused from, like I said, drinking beer, eating too many burgers, gluten, whatever. If I'm the type of person that has food allergy type stuff that keeps me inflamed, that over a period of decades could be impacting my brain long term.
Will be impacting your brain.
Will be, not could be, but will be. And is that the sort of thing that could lead to dementia, Alzheimer's, that sort of thing?
We think that's a factor in dementia. Absolutely.
Wow. So my diet could cause me potentially dementia in my older age.
It's amazing how often your mother is right about these things, isn't it? You are what you eat.
Yeah.
And if you eat food that's bad for you, it turns out to be bad for you. It's...
You didn't have to go to Harvard to learn that one.
My mother is going to watch this and she's going to be, I told you so.
I told you so.
There are things that we think are helpful for dementia in particular.
Okay.
One of which, the next thing, supplement that we're looking at are lion's mane mushrooms.
Oh man, I've been eating some right here.
Have you?
Yeah.
You see that? Lion's mane mushroom.
I got them on Amazon.
So.
Yes.
The thing that is different about turmeric, and that we're applying to the lion's mane, is our delivery system.
Yeah.
Okay. Turmeric, hemp, you eat them, and you absorb maybe 1% of what's in that dose.
Okay.
Most of it just goes right out into your poop.
Okay.
We've packaged these two extracts into a nanoparticle that gets absorbed 150x more than a standard supplement.
What is a nanoparticle?
A nanoparticle is a really, really tiny particle that mimics cholesterol in your diet.
Okay.
And so it gets absorbed like cholesterol, and it avoids being zapped by your liver like cholesterol.
Okay.
That's important because when you take a supplement, as soon as you eat it, the small amount that gets into your bloodstream immediately starts getting zapped by your liver.
Yeah, I've always heard that about any vitamins, right? I mean, only a certain percentage of it makes it in there. And so you guys are focused on hacking a pathway to having more of it get into the body.
And stay in your body.
Cool.
And circulate.
Through nanoparticles.
Through nanoparticles.
Well, that was worth going to Harvard for.
That was.
That sounds like
a
smart
I will have to admit that there's some aspects of that going to Harvard was useful for.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so y'all, the next one you're working on is lion's mane.
Lion's mane. So lion's mane is a mushroom that goes through this complicated life cycle, and the extracts from that mushroom are active in supporting nerve health, in generating nerve growth, and in reducing neuroinflammation. So if you want to help your brain, lion's mane is turning out to be a very, very useful supplement to take, even to the extent of there was a clinical trial that's been done now a few years ago where they gave a couple of hundred people with early onset Alzheimer's dementia,
Okay.
but early on, so they had just very, very subtle symptoms.
Meaning they're just starting to get a little confused and
Starting to have memory loss,
Okay.
get a little confused, not yet progressed to the dramatic memory loss and the behavioral changes yet.
mm-hmm.
Gave them lion's mane every day for a year and had a dramatic improvement is the wrong word. Everyone with Alzheimer's always gets worse, right?
Sure.
That's the problem with it.
Yes.
The people who took lion's mane stayed much more stable over that year
Okay.
than the people who didn't get lion's mane.
Okay.
That really stuck with me when I read that study.
Okay.
Because, you know, I worked on turmeric for my mother.
Yep.
My in-laws have a history of Alzheimer's in their family.
Okay.
My wife's grandmother died of Alzheimer's dementia.
Okay.
And I want to be able to have a supplement available really as soon as possible for
Sure.
her side of the family that I think is going to help. And I think that this is the most promising thing that I've found in a fairly broad survey of what's available for supporting brain health.
And it slowed down or stopped or somewhere in that. There's nothing that's reversing it, but at least it's slowed down the memory
There's
loss.
nothing that's reversing Alzheimer's dementia in any clinical trial anywhere
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah.
But in terms of slowing it down or stopping it, if you can catch Alzheimer's early and then stop it there, everyone would consider that an enormous win
Right. Yeah.
because the progression of that disease is awful.
Totally.
So,
Does eating the actual mushrooms help if you go to the grocery store and buy them and cook them?
yes.
Yeah.
So that study that I told you about was dried powdered mushroom.
Okay.
That they measured the level of one of the particular compounds that we know is active in that mushroom.
Yeah.
They standardized to a specific dose of that and gave people powdered mushroom. That was the study,
Yeah.
not the chemical
Not
extracts.
the chemical extracts.
No.
And so do you, in the way that you guys are delivering it is going to be more powerful than a powdered.
At least 50 times more powerful.
50 times
Yes.
more powerful.
Yes.
Wow. That's nuts.
Yes.
And how close are you on that one?
We are probably a year away.
Okay.
I have partnered with a company that manufactures the extract.
Okay.
They process these mushrooms by the ton.
Wow. Where do they get them? They grow them or?
They grow them.
Yeah.
They're grown in Colorado in hydroponics.
Hydroponic stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
So they have very, very solid control over the mushroom.
And lion's mane it's a legal mushroom. It's not like a psychedelic.
There's
or
nothing
anything.
psychedelic about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're not into producing stuff that's psychoactive. We're not
Yeah.
trying to. I mean, we're trying to help people with the problems they actually have.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they have great control over the mushroom life cycle. We are working with them to refine their extraction process in order to maximize the amount of the chemicals that we know to be active in their extract, which they're then going to supply to us. We're going to package. We also have a program of experiments that we're going to do in nerve cells, in brain cells,
Yep.
looking at inflammation and the activity of these compounds in them in our
Cool.
lab.
Cool.
Yeah. So we'll be publishing some of the science on lion's mane here in the next few months. actually.
So, kind of a nerdy question for you. When you say publishing, where do people go to find these studies?
PubMed,
PubMed.
PUBMED.
Okay.
It is a search engine from the National Library of Medicine.
Okay.
And if you just type PubMed, PUBMED, into Google,
Yep.
and you type lion's mane into that search engine,
Yeah.
it'll give you a list of those studies.
Oh, cool.
Okay.
And guys like you read these things.
Guys like me produce those
Produce
studies.
them and read other
and
people's.
and read everybody else's. Yeah, absolutely.
I remember, funny side note here, when we were hanging out with you guys February of 2020, before COVID happened, and you and your super genius wife were sitting at the kitchen table on an iPad, and somebody said, "Hey, did y'all hear about this SARS COVID? You know, it was starting to become a thing," and y'all were like immediately like, "Oh yeah, it looks like there's a lab in Wuhan, and yeah, probably a lab leak." Y'all had the whole thing figured out in about 10 minutes, you know, and a layman like me would have no idea how to go research that stuff. You know?
Yeah, it was funny early on before the information embargo happened.
Right.
It was fairly obvious
Right.
that this was coming out of Wuhan. It was almost certainly a lab leak.
Yeah.
The thing was going to be a big problem.
Right.
Those three things were. I remember this conversation we had.
I remember you going, and we brought these things called N95 mask, which I didn't know what that was at the time. We got enough for you and your family too, in case this thing blows up. It'll help. We're like, y'all were on it, man, before it even happened. You know. Yeah.
It was a difficult time for everyone.
Totally.
I'm really happy that it's behind us. There are some things that we learned that are probably useful from there. I really just hope that we don't throw the useful things out because it sucked so hard for everyone.
Because everybody has this knee jerk to just hate anything associated with it.
We lived through it.
Yeah.
You know, it was the worst time in our lives, I think.
Totally, yeah.
That everyone was going through it. I kind of wish that we had gone through it a little bit more, all kind of a sense of we're all in this together rather than the way it kind of happened. But I did mention that there's one really big silver lining out of COVID.
Yeah.
And that's the mRNA vaccines that are coming out for cancer. It's the same exact vaccine.
Wow.
Just a different mRNA structure in the payload.
Yeah.
Those things are going to impact our lives in a hugely beneficial way that's going to be there for everyone, regardless of whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
It's going to be there for you if you're unfortunate enough to get one of these cancers or someone in your family.
Yeah.
It'll be there in a way that would have taken many, many more years if COVID hadn't happened.
And we know how to mass produce it now.
We know how to mass produce it. That's one thing.
Yeah.
We made 1 billion of it.
Yeah, I heard Elon Musk talking about how hard it was. You know, he can invent this, whatever it is, a Cybertruck, but producing that baby is another challenge, right? And so same thing with done or any product, I guess.
Making one of something
Yeah.
is hard enough.
Yeah.
Making 100 million of something, particularly if it's a pharmaceutical, because it has to be done in exactly the correct way, has to be sterile. The mRNA stuff, there's the incredible science behind the mRNA vaccines is not the mRNA sequence. That's the easy part.
Okay.
It's the stuff that gets it into your bloodstream and gets it into your immune cells so that it can induce the reaction that it does without getting chewed up and spit out, which is what your body is trained to do with the random mRNA floating around in there. Like viruses are sometimes random mRNAs floating around in your body. They're a little more than that, but yeah. So there's some incredible technology behind those that's now available to the whole cancer world that is the positive legacy of COVID is going to be there.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, back to the brain. So we've got the supplements, the lion's mane, antioxidants, the CBD, turmeric. This is kind of not a supplement question, but at what point, if I have depression, if I have anxiety, if I have suicidal thoughts, should I go get my brain imaged?
So most of the time with those kinds of symptoms, unless you have a history of traumatic brain injury, imaging is not going to show anything.
Okay.
Okay. It's a very different answer for if you have a history of, a long-standing history in football.
So if I played high school football,
Yeah.
and 20 years later I'm having these depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, is that enough to justify going and getting imaged?
Yes,
Okay,
absolutely.
cool.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of dudes here in Texas.
It's a lot of dudes, especially here in Texas.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, whether or not you get an absolute answer from that imaging, it's valuable to get it because a health professional can do an awful lot with that information to help you get through those symptoms.
Right.
Okay. There are a lot of treatments for those particular symptoms that are very, very effective.
Yeah.
Incredibly effective.
And knowing what the problem is versus, because I think that's the hard thing. I'm depressed. Well, is it because I lost my job, or did I lose my job because I was depressed? I mean, it's hard to do I go to the therapist, or do I go to the supplements, or do I go to, there's so many different.
Go see your primary doc
Yeah,
first.
yeah.
Okay. The hard thing, especially for guys, is we see it as a sign of weakness to get help for feelings.
Sure.
Okay. Even though a lot of time those feelings have an origin inside our body and our brain chemistry that has nothing to do with your ability, your strength to get through the world and through the day. It is a part of the chemistry that is our brain makeup.
Mm-hmm.
And going and just saying to the doctor, here's the thing that I'm experiencing. If it were your back hurting, you would go.
Yeah. Totally.
Okay. If it's your brain hurting, that's how it shows up.
Yeah.
And so going and saying to your doc, what do we think our doctor's going to do? They're going to start laughing at us because we came and said
Yeah,
that? No, they're not. They're going to prescribe something to us, see how it works, and potentially refer us to someone else based on that.
Yeah.
Just like everything else.
Who would order the imaging? Is that my GP or
GP,
specialist? Or
probably not your GP. You would probably get put on something and sent to a neurologist
Okay.
to rule out structural problems before going to a psychiatrist,
Okay, got it.
right? Because you wouldn't want somebody who has some kind of structural problem that needs to have surgery, needs to have specific medication. You wouldn't want that person to get sent off to a psychiatrist before you'd work that stuff out.
It seems like, I mean, if I, like you said, if my back hurts, the first thing to do is X-ray, MRI. What's going on with your back? If I say I'm confused, I've got blah, 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 it seems like it's one of the later things that has been done is image the brain, but it seems like it should be one of the first things, right?
Usually nowadays,
Because the insurance doesn't want to pay for it or any of that.
no, I don't even think that's it so much. I think nowadays there's a pretty well described set of steps that one takes
Okay, got it.
that is generally covered
Okay.
and includes imaging
Okay.
that is fairly straightforward
Okay.
because a lot of people go through this.
Yeah.
A lot of people go through this.
Yeah.
And so it is a thing that you, when you get to the doctor and you get plugged into it, it's not a, oh, what are we going to do about this? It's, oh, I'm
is
on
the
a
protocol.
pathway that's clearly defined.
Yeah.
It's boom, boom, boom. These are the things we're going to do. Here are the things we're going to try. Just like other things that are very, very common,
Yeah.
this is one of those things.
Got it. Okay.
Supplements may be a part of that.
Yeah.
I'm not clear on supplements that are particularly useful for depression.
Okay.
The CBD derivatives and CBD itself, the hemp extracts, very useful for anxiety. There is a lot of information in the medical literature about those.
Okay.
A lot of people use THC,
Yeah.
the psychoactive component of hemp. which is not approved and
Yeah.
is not part of any legal hemp extract in this country, but nonetheless, long-standing history of people treating anxiety with it.
Yeah. And that seems like a tricky one because don't some people get more anxious with the use of THC, or is that just
Yes.
a dosing issue?
It is a chronic dosing issue. People who use a lot of THC over a long period of time, it is anxiety inducing.
Got it. So
Yes.
there's a happy medium there.
That's on the really low side.
low side,
The
yeah.
the science of THC suggests that any use that it has is in the microdosing range,
Yeah.
not in the gets people high range.
Got it. So if you're a little loopy, you're probably taking too much as far
Correct.
as a microdose. You don't even really notice a microdose. Is that?
Correct. But microdosing by definition means you're not getting a psychoactive effect from it.
Oh, okay. Got it. But you're getting the benefits of whatever the benefits are
Yeah.
from that.
Yeah. Over time, you will see reduction. People say this. I'm not a
Yeah.
big fan of THC.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Okay. Any other supplements that you recommend?
Depends on what it is you want to treat. So I'm not a believer in people should take this
everything?
supplement for every. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people say you need to. I have friends who are on 18, 20, 30
Right.
supplements.
And that's it. Like, it's so hard. Don't take this one. Don't take on food. This one take while eating. This one you take 3 times a day. This one it's like, oh man, I got to. That's my whole day trying to take these things.
I think people should have something specific they want to accomplish
Okay.
other than general wellness
Okay.
when they take a supplement.
Okay.
And I can make recommendations for those things. Beetroot extract for high blood pressure
Okay.
works pretty well by all accounts.
Okay.
And the mechanism is understood. That whole nitric oxide thing that I was talking about earlier,
Mm-hmm.
beetroot extract makes your body produce that stuff,
Okay.
okay? Which relaxes. Nitric oxide was originally called relaxation factor, relaxes your blood cells, your blood vessels, and makes them get bigger and reduces blood pressure.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about the anti-inflammatories, berries for antioxidant, the fish oils
Okay.
for cardiac health.
Okay.
Pretty good evidence for those.
Pretty solid. Is that like omega-3? type
Omega
stuff?
3s,
Yeah.
yeah.
Does that help with brain too, or mostly just heart?
I would say that the jury is still out on omega 3s and brains.
Okay.
There's certainly a lot of people who believe it. And there may be some evidence there in terms of counteracting the effects of diet that we talked about earlier.
Okay.
Omega 3s may be helpful for that in terms of the brain, but the strongest evidence is for cardiac.
What about creatine? I've heard creatine for brain can be a good thing too. You heard anything? on
I've
that?
always heard creatine for muscle,
Okay.
creatine for brain. I'm not familiar
Okay.
with a bunch of science on it.
Okay. Cool. And then what about just getting a good night's sleep?
Getting a good night's sleep is probably the single most important thing you can do for your brain health over time.
Wow.
Period.
Wow.
Yes. So,
So all the supplements in the world aren't gonna combat crummy sleep, or they'll help. But
how old is your mattress?
I think about 3 years.
Okay, so for a lot of people, they don't know the answer to that
Okay.
question, right?
Yeah.
10 years, 20 years. When was the last time I moved? No, we moved the mattress then too.
Right.
Right? A good mattress, a good pillow, nice dark room,
Sound machine.
maybe a sound machine, whatever it takes. If you're snoring, getting evaluated for sleep apnea
Yeah.
is a huge thing. You want to look at something that people don't spend a lot of time thinking about. The numbers on sleep apnea and things like strokes and heart attacks
Really.
are really scary.
Yeah.
And so people who snore go get evaluated for sleep apnea.
Okay. Now, is sleep apnea and snoring? Is it a like if you got some crazy in shape Olympian marathon runner, can that guy have those things too? Is it an out of shape thing? Does physical health?
It's more associated with people who are overweight.
Okay.
You have a lot of fat up in here.
Okay.
It weighs down those tissues and blocks off your airway.
Got it.
So sleep apnea is like snoring that's so bad that you stop breathing for periods of
Oh,
time.
wow. Okay, got it.
And then you don't breathe for 30 or 40 seconds until your CO2 builds up in your body.
Wow.
And then you jerk awake.
Yeah.
You don't wake up though. This can happen 50, 60, 70 times a night. All right. And when you see the video of yourself in the sleep lab doing this, it's terrifying.
Damn.
And the treatments, there's CPAP mask, there's the
Yeah.
nasal CPAP, there's some newer things that are around that also work, that are that are less having to deal with the mask thing. But universally, people with CPAP or people with sleep apnea, when they get on CPAP the first time and they wake up, they say, I never understood what a good night's sleep
Wow.
was.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah, I can see
Now,
that.
some people don't like the mask,
Sure.
and there are other treatments that are available.
Yeah.
But to get back to your original question, the good night's sleep for brain health, really critically important.
Yeah, I noticed that. I had a wild kind of 2 weeks, about 3 weeks ago, spring break, travel, this, that, and the other. And I was be talking to people and going, no, God, I can't remember it. Well, what's his name? And, total brain fog. And then I was like, dang, what is going on with me? I need to take some more Billy supplements or something, And then I got a couple good nights sleep. And it was all came right back.
We learned a lot about this from physician functioning and lack of sleep during residency.
Yeah, you guys don't sleep.
We do now
Okay.
because it's now mandated.
Oh, wow. That's smart.
When I was a resident, we would go 100 hours a week.
Okay.
And that's being on call.
Wow.
That's not good for anybody.
Yeah.
Not good for me.
Good for the
Certainly
patient.
not good for the patient I'm seeing at hour 96.
Yeah.
That's not good.
Yeah.
You forget things.
Yeah.
You're physically incapable of remembering everything you need to when you haven't slept.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what you want to try and do, you write things down. You try and do a checklist. Your eyes don't even see what's on the page when you're not sleeping properly. Your brain just doesn't.
Yeah, your
function
vision
right.
is even worse. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So, any tips for getting to sleep? Are there supplements that will help? Magnesium or something that help me get to bed a little earlier if I'm a chronic late night.
There's very good evidence for melatonin,
Okay.
and it's very well tolerated. So melatonin works so well that even in intensive care units, when a person is getting better from their illness, but they still need to be in the ICU for a few more days, one of the really important things we found is to get them back on their day-night sleep cycle. Melatonin will help people get to sleep even in the ICU where the lights are never completely
There's
off
people
and
in the room.
always people running around
Dinging
and
and
there's
donging.
things bleeping and making noises. And
Yeah.
melatonin is widely studied at this point.
Okay.
Definitely works.
Okay, cool. Don't get hit in the head. Wear a helmet. Take some supplements.
Get some sleep.
Get some sleep.
Get good sleep.
What about caffeine? What's that do to us? Is it good for us? Is it bad for us?
A reasonable amount of caffeine, probably neutral.
What's reasonable? A cup of coffee or two a day?
Yeah, 2 or 3 cups of coffee. If you're getting above that, you're getting to the point where you're ingesting enough caffeine like a drug.
Mm-hmm.
There's no doubt that caffeine has a number of effects on your body that are very pharmaceutical.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're drinking a lot of coffee, more than a couple cups a day, you're getting up in that range.
A friend of mine, I was hanging out with him a week or so ago, and he had this thing called a vagus nerve stimulator. Have you heard of this thing? What does that do?
There's a number of things that it's used for. So your vagus nerve carries your parasympathetic system to your body. So there's the sympathetic nervous system, which is fight or flight,
Okay.
revs you up.
Yes.
Okay. Parasympathetic winds you down.
Oh, got it.
Okay. And so the vagus nerve is the chill
Got
nerve,
it.
would be the way that I would put it.
So stimulating that helps chill you out.
It does things to your body that are the physical effects of chilling you out. Doesn't chill your brain out, although there's some people who are trying to work on that as well. Shoot things upward
Interesting.
into your brain. from
So
your
if you're
vagus
someone
nerve.
who's in fight or flight all the time, that could be a good practice.
Vagus nerve stimulator, I would not consider to be the first line of treatment.
It's not
for
the A
anything.
team, it's the B team.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. All right. What else? Any other tips or trips or buzz topics? NAD shots, IV drips, any of that kind of stuff helpful?
Well, it depends on what you mean by helpful. So if you're looking for performance, I would read about whatever the top end cycling teams are doing.
Oh yeah, good point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Those guys have it dialed out.
Yeah.
Ketone esters, something esters is the newest thing I was reading about.
Okay.
That they're using, that are not outlawed for cardiac performance, is apparently a really big deal in their world.
Yeah.
So, and they have the perfect test bed, right? You run the engine at its most efficient speed for an incredibly long period of time. It's all about oxygen delivery. Anything they can do to tweak that is probably true.
Cool.
Okay.
That's a good point. Check in what the cyclists are doing.
Yeah,
they're always going to be on the cutting edge.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In terms of physical performance for muscle function, strength, things like that, nothing compares to the anabolic steroids.
Yeah.
I would never argue that somebody should dose steroids beyond what normal physiology is. There are very big downsides to that. But if you're older and you are low in testosterone,
Yeah.
male or female,
Yeah.
there's pretty good evidence that it's beneficial.
That's what always been my thing. If I'm in my 50s or 60s or 70s, testosterone replacement or steroids. I mean, at that point, if it makes you feel better,
If it's
and increases
replacement,
yeah,
then it's not. To me, it's kind of a no-brainer. All
Yeah.
right, if you're getting your testosterone back up to the point where you recover well, you don't lose muscle mass, and your ability to do physical activities is greater.
yeah,
To me, that's a no-brainer.
yeah,
Especially since large-scale studies on testosterone replacement. Now, we're not talking about cycling up on steroids, but large-scale studies on testosterone replacement show either no effect or a beneficial effect on how long you live.
I see a lot of guys in the MMA and jiu-jitsu world cycling up on the testosterone. I would say kind of abusing it a little, getting a little too swole. What are sort of the negative side effects that can come along with that?
So a lot of those are well known, from the benign to the serious, the testosterone face, the acne, the mood swings,
Okay.
the shrinkage of your testicles.
Yeah.
That's a real thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so the destruction of your normal testosterone axis.
And if you go too far, you need to stay on testosterone the rest of your life type thing because your body, once you get off of it, won't regulate or...
You get hypotestosterone for certainly years.
Yeah.
If you're in the abuse range for a long period of time.
Yeah.
I don't know about the entire rest of your life, but I
Okay.
suspect if you're one of the people who is using to the degree that you and I are now talking about,
Yeah.
you probably never get back up to a normal level.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Then further than that, there are effects on your heart can get larger in a way that can predispose you to sudden cardiac death. We know that that's a thing in people who use steroids to a great degree, right?
Yep.
Random football players back in the 80s dropping dead because their heart got so large that it changed the nerve structure that's responsible for conducting the heartbeat.
Wow.
Okay. It increases your red blood cell mass, which can make blood clots more likely
Yeah.
as well. So there are a number of bad downstream side effects to steroid abuse.
What about these full body scans? My wife's been telling me about these. It's kind of a new buzz thing too. I think's happening.
So the temptation is there, right?
Yeah.
I go get a full body scan.
Yeah.
I get to see what's up.
What's going on?
What's
Yeah.
going on? The number of scans that you do that show something is very, very high. Whether that something is actually dangerous and needs to have something done about it.
Okay, so chances are, if I go get a scan, they're going to see something that's abnormal.
The chances are that if you go get a scan just to get the full body scan and something abnormal gets found, it's going to get evaluated
Yeah.
potentially by invasive means, right? So we're going to have to stick a needle in it, get
Biopsy
a
and-
piece of it, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
The chances are pretty high that it's going to turn out to be something you didn't need evaluated in the first place.
Just something
Okay.
that's benign.
Yeah. Like if everybody went out and got scans,
Yeah.
90+% of what was found didn't need to be found.
You'd live the rest of your life and not have it be a thing.
Correct.
Okay.
And so I'm not in favor of it. I've had the opportunity to get it done and have chosen not to for that reason. Not out of some altruistic notion of it's bad for the healthcare system. I mean, if you want to go pay the money and get it done,
Yeah.
by all means. But if you're healthy and you don't have a good reason to get a scan,
Yeah.
you're probably inviting more grief for yourself
Yeah.
than you're avoiding.
Especially if you're a hypochondriac by nature.
Now, if you're already a hypochondriac and somebody finds something in your adrenal gland,
Yeah.
and then a whole series of doctors tells you this is nothing to worry about, you're still gonna worry about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wouldn't you be better off not knowing
knowing.
that thing was there?
Is there a benefit? Have you heard of any stories of somebody that's finding like, oh man, I did have this and it did help? I mean, did those stories happen too from time to time?
They do, for
Okay.
sure. You hear the stories of people. The classic one is somebody who has an aneurysm in their brain artery. That these things are asymptomatic
Okay.
until they pop, in which case you're in a potentially lethal situation.
Wow.
The number of those that get found, pretty small.
Pretty slim.
Yeah. You hear about them because the ones who people are like, oh my God, I did it and it was the smartest thing I ever did. And you're like, well, I want to do the smartest thing that I ever did too, right? Except that probably isn't you. Yeah. If I were going to get it done, I would get the brain.
Do the brain.
Yeah.
And that's a PET scan or that's a, what do you
It's
call
an
that?
MRI.
MRI.
Yeah.
And that, I need to go to my GP and get a specialist, or are there like clinics that'll go just, I can get online and schedule an appointment and go get it
Oh,
scanned?
they'll
and-
take your money.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't need to see your GP for this one because your insurance won't pay for it.
Okay.
Yeah. You go find an imaging center that will allow you to just pay the money for it and get it done.
Then they'll give you the results usually.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's no better. If they don't tell you.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
they don't send it to a doctor that then I have to go see him and get the results, but usually somebody at these imaging centers.
No, there's usually a radiologist right there that'll read it. If not, a day or two,
Yeah.
they'll send you the result.
I did that for my knee. My knee was bugging me, and I just went to a place and got the MRI done, and the radiologist gave me the news, and I preferred that better than going to the GP that sent me to the ortho that.
No. there's a lot of problems with the healthcare system in this country.
Yeah.
So I can understand why you would have done that. But see, you had a problem with your knee.
Yeah. So I
And you
got
went and
checked
got
out.
an MRI of it.
Yeah.
That's completely reasonable.
Yeah.
I would support everyone doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of that, one of the things I want to hear your opinion on this. There are a ton of problems with the healthcare system, and if you got problems, this is still the best place to be.
The United States?
Yeah.
You better believe it.
Right. I mean, yeah, it sucks, but you're gonna live. I mean,
Our
hopefully.
problems are with access to health care, not the quality of health care.
Okay.
There's a reason why so many people want to come here and train to be a doctor. Okay. The acute care in this country literally sets the standard for the rest of the world.
Yeah.
The research that happens in this
And
country,
even in this city.
Yeah,
we're so lucky to be living here. Yeah.
is unbelievable.
Yeah.
You know, I can walk down the hallway at the University of Texas Medical School, the McGovern Medical School, and I can literally, she's the best person in the world. He's the best person in the world for what they do.
It's pretty cool.
I can walk next door to Baylor, and then the same thing is true,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Then I can walk down the street to Texas Children's and MD Anderson,
Yeah.
biggest cancer center in the world,
Yeah.
where the stuff that is next year's treatment is being invented there,
Pretty cool.
right?
Yeah.
The ecosystem of medicine in this town is the best in the world,
Yeah.
bar none, full stop, right here in Houston.
Yeah. Well, I know we got to wrap this up. Before we get out of here, what do you see AI in this space? I've gotten to where like I love you're like a human chat GPT over here, but I love like we were. My kid had an earache when we were on spring break in another country, and it was like, oh, well, can he take Benadryl? What's the da-da-da? And I felt like I was getting pretty darn good information. What are your thoughts and how AI is going to help out the medical space?
So it's already helping some things. In particular, there are specific aspects of imaging that AI is helping out quite a bit. Breast imaging, in particular.
What, it interprets the imaging?
Correct.
No way.
There is no AI does it all.
Yeah.
There's always a human, which is appropriate right now.
Sure.
But breast imaging it's the same image, right? Mammography is made to make the same image regardless of the breast.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you're looking for very specific things now on that image.
Yeah.
AI is very, very good at that. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The identification of an image that is normal. So let's say 50% of your chest x-rays are normal. The AI can say, here's the group that I think may have something wrong with them. Human, look at these.
Oh, okay.
Okay. That's very promising.
So it could speed up.
Make
and
the
be a little more
humans more efficient, I think,
Yeah.
is the way it's going to be.
Okay.
This idea that AI is going to take over for things, I'm really skeptical of that.
Yeah, me too.
A big part of medicine is interacting with the person who is in the room with you and
Yeah.
trying to understand what it is that they're here for.
Mm-hmm.
Because people lie to themselves. People lie to their doctor. People don't want to admit that things are as bad as they really are. And there's a real human aspect of teasing that part of it out.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at the spouse sitting in the chair with their arms crossed, looking angry at what's going on. We're a long way from AI being able to pick up those kinds of cues.
Sure.
which are really, really critically important in bringing the information in the beginning that needs to then be interpreted by AI.
Interesting. That's a unique part of medicine I never considered. So if you're a doctor talking to a patient and the mother's in the room or the father's in the room, or you're trying to get dad to quit smoking, or I mean, there's a whole family dynamic that you're communicating with to try to get this patient healthy.
You better believe it.
Wow.
And sometimes that dynamic is the only thing that allows you to get the information in the first place.
Yeah, because someone's
right?
not saying, "Hey, I drank a lot," or "I smoke a lot," or yeah, they're not forthcoming.
You would not believe how often it occurs.
Yeah.
Where a husband and wife come in for something that's wrong with the husband, and you say, "Okay, sir, tell me what brings you here today," and the husband says, "Oh, I'm fine."
Right.
Right? And you're like, you turn to the wife and say, explain to me what it is that's actually wrong with him.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Because guys, we don't want to admit anything's wrong ever.
Yeah.
And it's funny, you'll get all the way into the office and say, oh no, there's nothing wrong. I'm great.
We're good.
Yeah. And it turns out that they're about to have, a life-threatening heart attack or something, and they're having chest pain. And okay, we're going to send you to the emergency room now, that kind of thing. It happens all the time, right? So the idea that AI can help us interpret information that we gather, to me, that's a great one.
Cool.
Okay. The ability to help a physician take a set of symptoms and physical findings on exam and say, here's a list of things that we think we ought to be considering. Good doctors are doing that already.
Mm-hmm.
And they tailor their next questions to things that are on that list. AI can definitely help with that. The documentation that is such a pain, AI really needs to take that over.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can see that.
That should happen. And then the finding of things that are lurking that may not be obvious.
Like drugs that counteract with each other?
Drugs that interact with each other. These things that pop up in patients that are in the hospital that they didn't have when they got here.
Mm-hmm.
Infections, nutritional abnormalities, things that we have whole systems in place to try and counteract.
Yeah.
But those things that are coming up, the identification of those patterns over large patient sets,
Interesting.
to me, is a huge thing that AI should be good for.
Yeah, and that'd be pretty easy to implement too, I would think.
That should be available to us in the next few years, because AI, on top of the big medical informatics systems, is already a thing.
Wow, so cool. Well, Billy, I really appreciate your time, your being here. Before we get out of here, if people want to get some of the Trumeric, how do they order it? Is it online or?
It's online, www.trumeric,
Yep.
TRUEMERIC.com.
Cool. And then we can expect some Lion's Mane stuff maybe within a year?
Within a year, I think we'll see the Lion's Mane product within a year.
Awesome, dude. Well, anything else you want to cover before we wrap it up?
I think this is good. It's been a pleasure being here.
Yeah, and if people want to follow you, are you online anywhere? Can they follow your research, or how can they see what you're up to?
Well, I'm on Twitter.
All right.
I've really probably got to start posting if people want to follow me there.
And then tell me the name, just for my knowledge, of the place I can go nerd out and read studies. What was that again?
PubMed.
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 And there's a search engine. If there's a topic I'm interested in, I can type in sleep apnea or whatever, and stuff will pop up.
So if you really want to do this, go to PubMed, type the thing in the search engine that you care about.
Yeah.
And then over on the left side, you can pick specific kinds of articles.
Yeah.
Click the review article.
Click the review article. Okay, cool.
And those will give you, those articles are overview of the topic.
Oh, okay, got
because if you want to read about turmeric,
Yeah.
and you type turmeric into that engine, and it gives you 485 results.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're immediately going to be able, what do I do with that?
Yeah.
So if you click that review, it will give you just the articles that are reviews of some topic.
Okay.
And so that might be turmeric for arthritis, turmeric for brain health,
Okay.
right? Turmeric for cancer.
Got it.
Right?
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, we'll check it out. Thanks for coming. Hopefully we can talk you into coming back here some other time. Maybe when the Lions Man comes back out, have you back in or
We'll
something.
make that a date.
All right, brother. Thanks for
Sounds
being here.
great.
All right. Thanks, everybody.